The Serra motto, if you will, is prayer, service, and sacrifice. And I'd like to look at these through the eyes of those still in the throes of raising their families, as well as those on the other side, we grandparents and empty nesters, if you will, who have a heart and time for supporting vocations. Mr. Phil and I recently celebrated our 40th wedding anniversary. We have been blessed with the birth of, thank you, Miguel, with the birth of 8 children. One is already a saint. She was born, baptized, confirmed, and died as an infant without sin. A perfect saint in the eyes of the church. Julianne is a gift beyond measure to our family, and we count often on her intercession. And the 7 other now adult children grew up as our saints in training. 6 are happily married, giving us our 15 so far grandchildren. And our youngest, Troy, is a seminarian for the Archdiocese. Phil and I are both cradle Catholics. He's the 4th of 5 children, and before their deaths, his parents were married for over 50 years. Phil grew up in a home that often welcomed priests and religious around the table, the dinner table, to game nights and special family gatherings. And it was natural for Mr. Phil to consider a religious vocation as a young man because he had friendly relationships with priests. I'm the youngest of 7 children. My parents were married 27 years before divorcing when I was 8. My dear mother did the best she could to raise us in the faith. I remember clearly as a little girl her proclaiming one day that if she ever got us kids raised, she was going to run off and join a convent. It was just her fantasy at the time. But when I turned 18, she responded to God's call for her second vocation, and she entered a cloistered Carmelite convent. My mother spent the last 37 of her years, the years of her life, hidden, praying, and sacrificing for those who can't or won't or don't. She's lovingly referred to as Grandma's sister in our family, and she is known as one of God's greatest gifts to us. A religious vocation in a family is a grace beyond comprehension. I am certain it was my mother's prayers that brought Mr. Phil into my life. Throughout his junior and senior high school years, he was pretty sure he was called to the priesthood. And near graduation, he made a test your call retreat, and he was surprised to discover that really marriage was to be his vocation. Side note here, some 20 years and 5 or 6 kids later at that time, he was on a men's spiritual exercise retreat. And while in adoration, for whatever reason, he asked God why he hadn't called him to the priesthood. I try not to take that prayer too personally. He understood clearly in his spirit the words, I wanted your children. Phil is a steadfast Christian husband and father. He is a Joseph beyond compared to our family, and I give thanks to God for him pretty regularly, even after all these years. I never considered a religious vocation. My teen years were actually spent thinking and acting like I didn't need God and can do just fine on my own. Thank you very much. As I mentioned, though it was likely me that drove my mom to the convent, it was for sure her prayers that brought Mr. Phil and I together. When dating and even after we were married, he would always invite me to join him at Mass and to pray with him, but I wasn't interested. He was strong and sure and unwavering in his faith and his relationship with God, but he was also absolutely sure that God had called us to be together. He never pressured or guilted or shamed me. It was his steadfast, kind, unconditional love of God and me and my mother's prayers that gently won me over and guided me back to the Catholic Church. Thanks be to God. As newlyweds, the acceptance time and trust that our parish priest and the deacon invested in us was without measure. And our attending at their request within the first several years of a marriage encounter and a Cursillo retreat was foundational to our marriage and our future family life. As the kids came, the ways we practiced our faith changed and evolved, but was certainly central. Sunday and often daily Mass was a given. Nightly roses, crucifixes in every room, saints and guardian angels who are like family friends, meal prayers, car prayers, they're a big deal, and lots of holy water kept us going. Following the liturgical seasons and inviting others to join us, priests and families, to things like Fish Fridays, Epiphany parties, family rosaries, and prayer times were natural to us. Basically, striving for open-door hospitality and surrounding ourselves with other like-minded families and religious to share the journey was our MO. Here's an example of what I mean by evolving and striving. When the children were mostly all younger, we would strive for a decade each night with the full rosary on Sunday. And at one time, I was advocating for the rosary on our knees. The kiddos were not too thrilled about it. One Sunday, 2 dear priests came over for dinner, and after the meal, we invited them to join us for family rosary. And I tell you with heartwarming joy, they jumped up from the table, pulling their rosaries out of their pockets, popped into the family room, settled into the 2 comfy recliners, and they were ready to pray. You know what happened? The kids looked from them to me as they sauntered on over, settled into the couch and the other chairs to pray. You know, I'm looking at you, Father Joe. I gave up on the knee effort after that. It's all right. I share this bit of our family history with you just kind of as an explanation of how the Catholic faith, it's not something that we did, but it's who we are. It guided the rhythm of our life. Talking about what the kids wanted to be when they grew up included marriage and religious vocation equally. Asking what God wanted for them was the important thing. Our oldest son attended a test your call retreat while in college and discerned marriage was his vocation. I tell you, he's an amazing father, husband, spiritual leader in his community. Each of our 4 daughters were open to a religious vocation, and they considered it for various lengths. One just a weekend retreat, and wasn't really her thing ever, but she gave God first choice. One gave a summer of missionary work, and 2 gave several years as lay missionaries for the church. Right now, they are each beautiful, fervent Catholic wives, mothers, witnesses. Another story here. One of our daughters felt sure that God was inviting her to finish her last 2 years of high school at a boarding school for girls open to religious vocation. And after much prayer and guidance and knowing how hard it would be for us to have her leave home earlier than we would have thought, we agreed and joyfully helped her prepare for this experience. Her grandparents were not in agreement with us, and they didn't mind letting us know that at all. The day before she was to head out, many really kind and supporting friends stopped by to love on her and wish her well. And as I was sitting on the steps, just pondering the outpouring of kindness and generosity from so many, I thought to myself how sad it was that her own Catholic grandparents didn't get it and didn't support her, what we thought was her heroic and generous decision. And I then heard really clearly in my thoughts, you didn't get it either, but you still received the grace. And as I sat there in stunned silence, memories of my mother's departure played in my mind. She was actually invited to Carmel when I was 17, but I certainly didn't get her vocation. And I refused to write the letter saying she had my blessing, if you will, to go. I wasn't living in her home, but as still a minor child, she needed my permission. So she had to wait until I turned 18 before she could enter. As I mentioned earlier, myself and all of my siblings and now all of our children and even our grandchildren, we have received untold graces from the generosity of my mother's yes. Also, of notable mention, we noticed with surprise how those faithful Sunday Catholic grandparents, within just a few short months of our daughter's earnest pursuit of God's will, seemed to have an infusion of renewal in their personal faith life, becoming much more involved in their parish and generally more joyful and loving to all of us. A religious vocation in a family is a grace beyond comprehension. Our middle son attended a minor seminary for 3 years before discerning out of priestly formation. He's now a real happily married husband and devoted father. Sadly for this mama's heart, he doesn't see the need to be a practicing Catholic, and he'd much rather be fishing on Sunday than attending Mass. But several things keep me from despairing. I know the power of a mother's prayers. I experienced it. I know the power of unconditional love and kindness, even while maintaining an uncompromising faith, to change hearts. I've experienced it. I know and I claim the graces and promises of the 9 First Fridays, the 5 First Saturdays, the daily masses and rosaries, that he was immersed in for many years, so many treasures that we have in our faith. And fourthly, I trust the prayers and promises of the green scapular that are prayed fervently for him every day. I share this for those that might be listening to this and thinking, forget a vocation, I can't even get my kid to church on Sunday. Have hope. Love unconditionally, be kind, pray, and trust. And then there's our Troy. He will begin his 4th year of seminary formation this fall. His vocation story is still being written, and it's his to share. Only God knows how it will turn out, but knowing that Troy is striving to know and do God's will, we are confident that whatever he does when he grows up, it will be right for him and for the glory of God. So that's a bit about vocations in our family that might be interesting to Serra members in the thick of raising families and navigating religious vocations in your children. Basically, be a praying parent. Practice hospitality, especially to priests, religious, and good like-minded friends and families, so the kids can experience all the options as natural calls within a living faith life. Making vocation options a natural part of family life makes it easier for them to be considered. The grace comes as a fruit of seeking and following God's will with our free will. For all of us Serra members open to praying for, supporting, and nurturing religious vocations for the good of the church, I share with you 2 examples. One, when talking with a priest recently, he mentioned that there are many seminarians that do not have family support and encouragement. I was reminded of a time when I was in a prayer group and we were praying and someone prayed for an increase in religious vocations and perhaps even from our own families. And one of the ladies stopped in the middle of the prayer group and exclaimed, "Oh, she just loved her children way too much to allow them to consider that vocation." And several other women actually nodded in agreement. I found this so sad. As a parent, our most important job is to get our kids to heaven. The surest way to do that is for them to follow God's will completely, God's plan A, not our plan A for them. Let's all pray for the courage to accept whatever God's will is. The second, be a Mary. We were blessed to meet Mary Fong in 2010, long before anyone outside of our family and maybe a few close friends even had any idea that Troy felt that God might be calling him to the priesthood. We would see Mary every Monday evening at adoration, sitting up front on the right side of the church. We sat on the left toward the middle. Troy made a holy hour and served most every benediction throughout his junior high and high school years. And one Monday, Mary shuffled over. She shared that she was feeling a little sad. "I'm almost 90 years old," she said, "and tonight I realized I won't be around for your son's ordination." Whew. Oh my, I said, "Well, I don't know about that." Remember, nobody even knew it was on his radar at that time but Mary. Anyway, I said, "I don't know about that, but please do pray for him to know and do God's will." "Oh, I do," she said with a twinkle. And she faithfully did, as well as offering him words and notes of encouragement up until her death in 2018. May she rest in peace and pray for us. Be a Mary. Pray for and encourage vocations. Speak up when the Holy Spirit places someone in your path that you have a feeling about. Ask them if they've considered a religious vocation. I recently heard of a young man who said 3 different people randomly asked him if he'd considered a vocation to the priesthood, and he just ignored their situation. But when a 4th person asked him, something clicked. And he's now a seminarian for our archdiocese. About 22 years ago, a dear priest friend, Father Troy Gately, and yes, that's Troy's namesake and his godfather, he asked Mr. Phil if he'd ever considered the diaconate. And he hadn't, but then he did and was accepted into the formation program. We moved to Texas before he completed it, and the program and formation here and there didn't match up, so he thought he must have received whatever he was meant to during that time. Fast forward 20 years, and while attending ordinations, something was mentioned about Father John Paul and his deacon father, and it resonated and stirred something in Phil's heart. He would tell you my elbow to his ribs resonated too, but I don't remember that part. Shortly after that, he randomly ran into two now deacons from his first class, and they both encouraged him to look into the program again. He did, and now is information to be, God willing, ordained in the class of 2021. Ask about and encourage vocations when it's placed on your heart. In closing, let's review what I call the PIE plan. Pray, invite, encourage, because we can all pray for our priests. We can pray for those God might be calling to the priesthood. We can pray for them by name and sacrifice for them and offer a decade of our rosary for them and holy hours and communions, whatever. Just pray for vocations. It matters. We can all invite and include priests and religious into our family experience, add them to dinner or over for a coffee or a cold beer. Please just remember, don't invite them with an agenda. It's not the time or the place. But certainly they serve in the person of Christ at the altar and in the sacraments, and hopefully in every encounter. But they are also men who have chosen a sacrificial and heroic life. We can invite them to live their vocation within our homes and families, to do life with us. It's okay if it's crazy and messy. Our father Troy was known to say after a Sunday evening hanging out in our home that we were his vocation confirmation. I tell you, a priest friend is like a kiss from Christ to the family. Let's invite the priests in our path into our homes. And even if they can't come right away, surely their hearts will be blessed and warmed by the invitation. A side note here, Troy recently expressed a little disappointment in his summer assignment. He'd really looked forward to experiencing the pastoral part of the priesthood within the heart of the homes of the community that he was signed to. I think he took it for granted that they would have invitations because that's how he grew up. But sadly, sharing in family life has been almost non-existent for him. On the other hand, the other side of this side, last week, one of our daughters and family had a dear priest and seminarian over for dinner. The next day when I asked her how it went, she groaned or squealed or I don't know, in delight. She said it was so wonderful and they couldn't wait to have him over again. Certainly, these are crazy times and many people are social distancing and whatever, but no. Our priests and seminarians still want and need the family experience, and we need them. And we can all encourage. We can thank priests for their vocation, for their yes. Thank seminarians for giving God the first chance in their life. We can ask that respectful grocery checker outer if he's considered a vocation, or that lovely young lady that watches the kids in the nursery or serves the coffee in the morning. And guys, let's be especially kind to the young family at church whose children make a bit of noise. They might be raising our future pastor. So pray, service, sacrifice. This is what Serra is all about. And we can do this for our priests and religious. We must do this for them and for the future of our faith. It matters. Thank you for listening.